This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode is brought to you by Palmolive. Family time isn't just the big moments. It's weeknight dinners, sitting around the table, everyone talking all at once. So when the plates are empty and the sink is full, use Palmolive Ultra. Palmolive's most powerful formula removes up to 99.9% of grease, leaving your dishes sparkling clean. And the new convenient pump makes cleaning even easier, so you can spend less time tackling dishes and more time together. Shop now at palmolive.com.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. You know those friends who support your preference for podcasts over music on road trips? That's the energy State Farm brings to insurance. With over 19,000 local agents, they help you find the coverage that fits your needs, so you can spend less time worrying about insurance and more time enjoying the ride. Download the State Farm app or go online at statefarm.com. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game with me, Kevin Day, and Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire, who's just spent the last 4 seconds saying the words, serious Kieran, serious Kieran, serious Kieran, and then couldn't resist breaking into a little cheeky smile at the end. Now, Kieran, I feel like I haven't seen you for weeks, and yet last week I felt like I saw you every hour. No.
Yeah, I'm good, except... No football this weekend.
Oh, well,
and I take it all back about ticket prices because I hadn't experienced a trip to the garden centre before.
Oh.
And my God, that was a wallet lightning experience with the Baroness. And then she'd been very, very busy cleaning sort of one of those water jet things, patio, whatever it is, cleaners. So it was all looking fantastic, and I've just got home from Liverpool. But we've got 6 starlings who have just been born in the last month or so, month or two, which is fantastic. They nest in the eaves, but they've just started their first flights. And what I didn't know is that the first thing that a bird does when it flaps its wings is poos. So these starlings, they all come out and they all head in the same direction. So remember 633 Squadron and the Dam Busters. We now have these strobes and the Baroness who's going, well, I've spent 3 hours with the Karcher cleaning all that. It is now, it's now looking not too great.
Yeah, what you have there, Kieran, is a mini murmuration. When you see hundreds of starlings together, that's a murmuration of starlings. So what you don't have is the comedy value of an elderly cat looking up at said starlings going, if I was 3 years younger, I'd be up that building. Also, what you should do, Ali and I are as one on this, to avoid those trips to the garden centre, is we tell everybody that we have a bee-friendly garden. So our garden, basically, we haven't touched it. But that means it's good for the bees.
Exactly.
It's essentially a meadow. So,
and for your wallet.
And for the wallet, exactly so. We did see each other, Kieran, for rather too long a time, an awkward 15 minutes, when we did our Q&A the other night for our club members. And I feel we should apologise again, because we did our Q&A on a new platform, and we sat there alone for 15 minutes wondering why. Because normally we have 80, 90 people come in to say hello and join in, and we had one lone visitor after 15 minutes who said, "You've forgotten to press the allow all button." So between us, we managed to keep 90 people out of our own Q&A for 15 whole minutes. But it went well after that, Kieran.
That was great fun. Really lots of gossip, lots of scandal.
And until it turned out that this new platform only let us talk for an hour.
Yes,
basically, it's new. It's not Newsday, Kieran, but there's so much news. It might be. It's Questions Day. But 3 big things have happened since we last spoke to our lovely audience, because we recorded our news pod a little early last week. Three big stories, one of which, Kieran, in the Championship, we've got a Premier League story, a Championship story, and unfortunately a story that's now League One, even though this time last week it was still Championship. And the Championship story, Kieran, I'm not happy with. We'll come on to that, but I normally leave the opinions to you on this one, but I have strong feelings about this. So obviously I'm aware of how we stand legally, and I'm aware of the plaintive message we had from producer Guy reminding us that legal things do apply. But we'll come on to that. The first one, Kieran, I should think it was only Leeds fans who were upset at the sacking of Liam Rosenior as Chelsea manager. And again, we saw them today go from a pitiful shower when they played you during the week to a badge-kissing behemoth. Today, that Chelsea, I don't know if that Chelsea badge had mint on it today for somebody. There's a lot of kissing and licking that Chelsea badge going on today. I don't think, Kieran, there's two things I want to particularly ask you about this. First of all, a general question. I can't recall a time when the ownership, the executives of a club, came in for so much stick for a decision as this one, led by Captain Gary Neville. He's absolutely furious with them. Most journalists have been laying into the ownership, all sorts of hints that the Premier League haven't done enough to rein these bad owners in. But secondly, he was 3 months into a 6.5-year contract? It must have cost a fortune to pay, although we don't know. Sky reported for a couple of days that there was a break clause in the contract and that Chelsea and Rosenior were actually negotiating how much he would be paid off and how long he would have to wait until he got another job. So all very complicated. But why, when you've got a record of sacking managers or managers leaving, why did you give him a 6.5-year contract in the first place, Kieran?
Well, the reason for that is that Clearlake, Egbali and Bowley liked what they saw from Liam Rosenior's tenure at Strasbourg and wanted to protect the club if he was able to repeat that progress at Chelsea. What happens if he did extremely well and then a big club comes in for him? In which case there has to be compensation paid. And sort of to look at the reverse of that, when Graham Potter joined Brighton, he initially joined on a 3-year contract. After 2 or 3 months, they liked what they saw, so they gave him a 6-year contract, and therefore it cost Chelsea £22 million in compensation for Brighton. So what Chelsea are doing here is they're saying, if this is a success, then whoever comes into this, whoever wants to recruit Liam Rosenior has to go and pay a large sum of money. So Chelsea were protecting their own interests. Now, we had Nick Humphreys from Pennington's on the price of football a couple of months ago. And he is a sports lawyer. He specialises in employment and employment rights. And Nick made it fairly clear that a manager, if dismissed, has an obligation to try to find employment. Does Liam Rosenior want to not work in football for the next 6 years? Clearly not. He's done his coaching badges. He's a progressive guy. I did EFL Matters with Liam on a couple of occasions at Sky, and I was incredibly impressed with. He's very articulate. He was very thorough. He had interesting views on sort of developing players and developing tactics and so on. So he will want to return to football, and that means if he does, any payment from Chelsea would automatically be curtailed, depending on how much money he was earning. And at the same time, if you take a look at the small print of contracts, and we've not seen this, it has to be said, but I'm fully aware of it happening at other clubs, there is normally a clause which says if X happens, then the club does not have to pay up the remainder of the contract and instead can pay a fraction of X. Now, it looks as if that has been triggered in terms of what's happened at Chelsea. And I absolutely understand Gary Neville's viewpoint. I absolutely understand the viewpoint of many Chelsea fans. What the Chelsea owners will say, we're still the world champions when we last looked. We're still the holders of the Europa Conference. We're currently 2 titles in. So that will be their positive, and we're now in an FA Cup final. So is the performance that bad? Anybody that saw Chelsea's performance at Brighton on Tuesday night, even clearly, I want the result to go one way. We were all sort of looking at each other, going, "This lot aren't trying." They're not putting any effort in, but that's a footballing issue. So, what can the Premier League do? Okay, absolutely nothing. If you take a look at the owners and directors test, and we'll be coming back to this later, do the owners have any outstanding criminal convictions for fraud or dishonesty? Absolutely not. Do they have the resources to fund Chelsea losses? Well, sort of. We've discussed that at length in terms of them getting external funding, but the bills are being paid, and there's no indication that the bills won't be paid going forwards. So it is not a test of competence, and this is one thing which we'll stress, and we'll come back to, I think, in terms of one of the questions later. So if you are an idiot billionaire who has no knowledge of football and appoints yourself as sporting director, fill your boots. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to waste your own money. You're allowed to waste the money of others, provided the bills can still be paid. And this appears to be the case with what we've seen at Chelsea, that they are six managers in. And if you take a look at some of those managers, we've got the somewhat surreal case of one of the managers they sacked is going to be the England manager at the next World Cup. One's going to be the Sweden manager. One's going to be the United States manager. And one's doing very well elsewhere as well. So it does seem a strange behavioural trait that they have, and a lot of people have said, is it the owners or is it the sporting directors? Why have 5 sporting directors? Who is the manager answerable to at Chelsea? So it's a club with a strategy but no culture, and that's why. When they try to recruit everybody bar the tea lady at Brighton's attitude is, well, you're not taking our culture, you're taking our staff, and they just rinse them every single time.
I noticed Leeds fans booing Cucurella today for the first 10 minutes of the game, and then realising that they had no particular reason to do so, and then stopping. But it's just by osmosis, they just noticed everyone else booing him before we might as well boo him as well.
Well, they're friends with the Baroness.
Oh. I'm interested in 2 things there, Kieran, and I'm not the only person to say this. First of all, this idea of protecting against poaching by a bigger club. As you say, they're world champions. There aren't many bigger clubs in football than Chelsea in recent years. Champions League winners, won the Premier League several times, incredibly rich. There's only 3 or 4 teams you could argue are bigger than them in world football. And secondly, the idea of how long he has to wait for another. Now, clearly he doesn't want to be out of football for 6 years, but you can imagine this young man is damaged, he's bruised. It might well be that he wants a year away from the game. It may well also be that the sort of club he thought would be interested in him 6 months ago before Chelsea will no longer be interested in it. So it may well be that his next job is limited to other championship clubs, smaller clubs in Europe that he doesn't feel he wants to take. So how long does it take before this mythical cut-off point where he's no longer paid?
Well, I think realistically he'll get a 12-month settlement, because I think what he's got to be able to prove to pick up that settlement. And again, this was something if I recall correctly from listening to Nick when he was on the show, he has to apply for jobs which pay either the same or more money than he was on at Chelsea. And again, as you say, Chelsea are a very successful club. And if he takes one of those, then the payoff effectively it cuts down. And then I think after 12 months, he probably won't get anything else, and he can then move on to another job. And if you take a look at what happened with Graham Potter and what happened with Poch, they both effectively. Well, I wouldn't say they're at the beach for 12 months, but you didn't see their names mentioned or linked to any other clubs. And all of a sudden, Poch then went to the United States, and Graham Potter turned up at West Ham. So that is how I suspect the system will work. So, again, we are dealing with a young man's career here. So I wish Liam Rosenior all the best. All I can say, I've met him. He's very personable. He seems a very decent guy. And football is a brutal industry.
Well, talking of which, Kieran, the second news story brings us to West Brom, a club that we like. We've spoken to their owner. We had a very interesting, frank and open interview with him. That's a tautology, I realise that. But I'm agitated by this story, Kieran. They were deducted 2 points last week after Leicester had been relegated at a time when it would have taken a set of unusual circumstances for West Brom to go down, even with the 2 point deduction. So you could argue it's a pointless exercise anyway. They've pointed out it's the smallest ever breach of Premier League or EFL regulations to be punished. It took 3 months to charge them. Their accounts came out in December. They were charged, I think, three or 4 days ago. It took 24 hours to punish them, which is very strange. And what they're pointing out is that as far as they're concerned, if there was a breach, it was because of money they donated to their own foundation, and they are claiming that within previous rules, that money shouldn't have been counted. So it seems to me, Kieran, A, they've been harshly done by, or B, was a completely, excuse the pun, pointless exercise. Because essentially they haven't been punished at all. The 2 points is not being carried over to next season. So there is no punishment. So I don't quite understand what's gone on here. All I understand is I think for once it's the first time that I've actually said this they don't deserve this point deduction. I don't understand what's happened here. I don't understand why the EFL have drawn this particular line in the sand. And of course it plays into the hands of all those conspiracy theorists, even though the EFL and the Premier League are completely different organisations. People go, hang on, why was Chelsea treated like that and West Brom were treated like this?
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot to unpack, and the written explanations have not yet been published, which I think doesn't help the situation, because the internet is very, very good at filling a vacuum.
Yeah.
I think West Brom have saved the EFL's bacon here by improving their results in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Because if that 2 points deduction, and remember, West Brom were charged, it was a couple of weeks ago, and then from what I make out, I think the hearing probably going to take more than 2 days, and then the judgment appears to be knocked out within 24 hours. Yeah. At the same time, we're 16 months into waiting for a judgment for Manchester City case. Now, part of me should say, well, hold on, perhaps the EFL should be given some credit here, because they have said on numerous occasions, we want punishment to be quick and in the season to which it can most closely relates, in which case it should be applied this season. But what would have happened if West Brom results hadn't been as good and this 2 point deduction knocked them into a relegation place, and then they can say legitimately, well, hold on, our game plan for the last 2-3 weeks is to get a draw at matches we know we'd have to win. Equally, the same principles would apply to Oxford and Portsmouth. And without going into details, I had a conversation with somebody I can call the secret Pompey Chime, who said, we may or may not have had discussions with our lawyers because to try to work out where we stand. Because I think the fear for Portsmouth, and again, Portsmouth's results, fair play to them, their results improved as well. Yeah. The fear Portsmouth, and presumably Oxford as well, was that West Brom wouldn't get the points deduction until next season, and therefore, where would they leave this? If Portsmouth being relegated, Oxford have been relegated, where would it have left those clubs? So, fair play to West Brom. They've improved on the pitch, and therefore they've been able to absorb this 2 points deduction. Commiserations to Oxford that they have been relegated. Commissions to all clubs that have been regulated. They have been relegated, but it's still concerning that of the 3 clubs that have been relegated from the Championship this season. We've got Sheffield Wednesday, who are still on negative points.
Yeah.
We've got Leicester City, who have had a 6-point deduction, and we could have had a third had it not been for the fact that West Brom's results had improved. That's not good for brand EFL. So I do have a degree of sympathy with the EFL. When it comes to the numbers and the breach, it's a bit like offside. You're either offside by an inch or you're not offside by an inch.
Yeah.
And I did my sums, and it looks as if the EFL have changed their approach to how not gifts in kind, but what happens if a member of the coaching staff gives 30 hours of their time once a month or once a quarter to the community scheme. How is that accounted for? And I think that has proven to be the issue here. I did my sums, and it looks as if the EFL have backdated some of this, which to me seems a bit harsh, but some of the rules have been in place for the current season. And if that is the case, then based on my calculations, I reckon that West Brom are probably less than £1 million over the limit. And I spoke to one of our secret lawyers over the weekend. He says, well, I'll be honest, Kieran, whilst this one's whizzed through, the legal costs will be running into hundreds of thousands. So we've got a farcical situation whereby a club has it looks like a very, very minor breach on a very contentious issue, and has been sanctioned as a result. There have been legal costs incurred. There might have been legal costs incurred by those other clubs scrambling around who feared a late judgment, and it's all very messy. And there's one outstanding thing that I'm still not certain of. Leicester City lost £180 million in the 3 years to the 30th of June 2025. Now, under the PSR rules, they're only allowed to lose 83. Is the EFL going to charge them with that breach? Well, we don't know. If not, it makes the West Brom situation look quite farcical, because the West Brom calculations don't seem to have been applied to such a same rapid. And it's not fair on Leicester, because if therefore they do get charges next season, they could have a points deduction in League One for misdemeanours, which took place 2 seasons ago, and yet West Brom was subject to a punishment this season. So look, the EFL have got a tough job. I'm not denying that, but I think I know what will have happened. The comms department will have said to them, and the legal department says, say nothing, don't do any interviews, don't talk to anybody. We've got lockdown. And then other people, and that includes the likes of you and me and Stefan Borson on TalkSport and so on. We will try to fill that vacuum. We will try to give a fair assessment, but we're having to do it on the basis of scraps, and I don't think it helps the EFL's cause.
Hey Mama, thanks for making all my favorite recipes.
Hi Ma, thanks for your unfiltered advice.
Hi, Mom. Thanks for always being by the phone.
Hey, Mom. Happy Mother's Day.
When you ship UPS Air at the UPS Store, your items arrive on time or your money back. Guaranteed at no extra cost. Exclusively at the UPS Store U.S. retail locations. Visit the upsstore.com/airshipping for full details. Terms and conditions apply. Send your Mother's Day gifts at the UPS Store and we'll get your gratitude there on time.
We'll come on to Leicester very shortly, Kieran, because I'm aware we have got questions to answer as well today. West Brom are appealing this decision, which is an indication of how angry, it seems, from what we're hearing from various sources, how angry they are about this, because you kind of think, well, there's no point, even if they get the 2 points back, it's not going to affect them financially. But basically, their two arguments are the fact that, and we are, in general, the EFL know, they listen to us, they know that in general we're on their side, and when we're not, we acknowledge how difficult their job is, having to keep all those clubs happy and try and be consistent. But West Brom's argument is, why did it take so long to charge them? Then why did it take so quickly to go through the committee process and to give the punishment? Because it seems to West Brom that the EFL were waiting simply for West Brom to do better. And as you say, that's really, really helped them out, because they've gone, well, let's charge them now. They're staying up. Maybe everyone's going to ignore this. And also, West Brom are perfectly adamant in saying that at the start of this process, the EFL rules on donations, either in kind or in actual money to foundations, were different to how the EFL are applying them now. Now, Palace fans know that from UEFA, and there's all sorts of... The argument still goes on about when did UEFA tell Palace the rules have changed, and West Brom are adamant the EFL didn't tell them the rules have changed. I don't know whether West Brom have got the same email system Palace have, whatever, but West Brom don't want this to go away, and I admire them for that, because I do... normally, I can see why a club is charged and has points deducted. This time, I can't. I can't for the life of me see it. And I know what you're saying, you're either offside or not offside, but on this occasion, I think VAR and the semi-automatic offside thing has got it wrong, actually.
Yeah, no, I've got huge sympathy. I want Adrian Charles to have his smile back.
Well, I think it would take more than West Brom staying up to bring the smile back to Adrian Charles' face. I don't know how much time you spent with Adrian Charles, Kieran. It's going to be a while before the smile comes back. But again, Frank Skinner. He's not one you. It's not top of the list of things that Frank's notable for, smiling in adversity. But there you are. That's partly a Birmingham thing. We know that, Kieran, don't we? Not that they're in Birmingham. They'll be telling me now. But Leicester, Kieran, with all the discussion about Tottenham and West Ham going down, in its own way, Leicester's relegation to League One is as big a story. The BBC report that they're facing a £70 million at least black hole next season. They quote the country's leading football finance expert, basically their headline says disastrous football on credit cards gamble.
That sounds quite me, doesn't it?
Yes. It had you written all over it, that quote. But also I read these things and I go, why did they never? I wonder if Kieran's phone was busy. I wonder if Kieran had just switched it on. Would they phone me and say, leading football finance assistant, Kevin Day said? No, of course they wouldn't. The question people are asking me, Kieran, is what happens parachute payment-wise. So what happens to the parachute payment from the Premier League, and presumably they'll be getting a parachute payment from the Championship?
Right. Leicester City, because they were in the Premier League in season 24-25, and that was the first season they'd been there, first continuous season. They are therefore entitled to 2 years of parachute payments when they are relegated to the EFL. Not the EFL Championship, the EFL.
Right.
So we saw this with Luton Town. Luton this season will be getting around about £39 million in parachute payments. So therefore, for season 26-27, Leicester City will be getting that £39 million. That's the good news. Here's the not so good news. Leicester City took out a loan from Macquarie Bank, which was secured on Leicester City's parachute payments for the 2 seasons. Now, right. We don't know the exact amount of that loan. The interest rates are quite high. I think they're between 9 and 11%.
Yeah.
So let's play this cautious. Let's say it's 3/4 of the sum, that 3/4 of the parachute payments. So therefore, Leicester's going to get £9 million in reality. Effectively, it'll get 39. It has to give 30 to Macquarie, and on top of that, it gets the EFL TV deal, which is worth about £2 million. 2 years ago, Leicester City were in the Premier League and they were getting close to 120 million.
Yeah.
So this is where I think the critics of parachute payments have some validity. they are not there to allow you to borrow money. That was not the purpose of parachute payments, to allow you to borrow money to keep the lights on. Or although it could be argued, what's the alternative to not doing that? So Leicester City have substantial sums outstanding to other clubs for players purchased. They have made significant sales of players, but again, nearly every time that they've sold a player in the last 3 to 4 years, they phoned up Macquarie. And what Macquarie does, I don't like it. It makes me feel uneasy, but it's perfectly within the rules. They say to Macquarie, look, we've sold James Maddison to Spurs, or we've sold Kieran and Dewsbury Hall to Chelsea. We've got 4 or 5 IOUs sitting in our front drawer. How much will you give us for them? And Macquarie said, we'll give you 85%, 88% of what they're worth. So that means that whilst they're due to receive instalments, they're not actually going to be physically cash in Leicester's accounts. So that is my main concern. The owner has not been putting money into Leicester City Football Club, so the owner's effectively king power. So is that through choice? Looking at the pronouncement by the owner, Top, I think his name is the guy from Thailand. He said, it's really upset, disappointing season. It looked to me like it had been produced by AI. I'll be honest. When I read it, it looked like this is sort of very generic. As how much does this come from the owner? How much does this come from the comms department? How much does this come from Claude, or whoever it's going to be? But there was no indication of Leicester City not being able to fulfil its financial duties. What are the alternatives if the owner can't put the money in? Well, there's effectively no parachute payments, or there's going to be very little parachute payment money left over. There will be some players who are potentially saleable, so that will be one thing to consider. You don't tend to get big fees for League One players, let's be honest. And there will be players who are on big money. Now, from what I understand, that Leicester have learnt their lesson from the first relegation three years ago, I think it was, where quite a few members of staff were not in receipt of relegation clauses. So I think they have addressed that. And I have been told by 1 or 2 people that they've even got clauses for relegation to League One as well. Those clauses will not be significant. And Leicester's top earners are likely to be earning between £4 and £5 million in the Premier League. If you knock a quarter off that, they're still earning 2 3/4 to £4 million. So what's going to happen to those players if you've just been relegated twice? There's not a long queue of suitors, unless you've had an outstanding season. My concern is that there will be a rollover in terms of some of the wage commitments. The player signed the contract in good faith. Leicester City offered those contracts in good faith. So the contracts can't be ripped up by either party. And that does put a cash flow pressure onto the club. So this effectively, from my observation, leaves 2 options. A, the owner has to find cash. Now, I don't know the extent of King Power's finances, but the King Power have to find the cash to provide the funding, or alternatively, Leicester City need to find themselves some new owners and pronto.
The irony is, Kieran, that when you say people won't be queuing up to buy League One players, they're essentially Premier League players, 5 or 6 of them. And you look at the names, do you think these are they should be playing for Fulham, shouldn't they? These players, which is part of the problem. And 2 other things, you mentioned that last promotion they had from the Premier League, and we did a show there, Benefit there. Just weeks before the end of the season, and it looked like they were going down, but there was still an incredible optimism from Leicester City fans. They said, we'll go down, but we'll come straight back up, which they did. That optimism is long gone. But the thing I'm most interested about, Kieran, is what were the circumstances in which Leicester City went to Macquarie offering the parachute payment for loans anyway? Because right from the start of us doing this pod, the name Macquarie is one that it's like a parent telling frightening stories to a kid at bedtime. You use the name Macquarie to scare me, Kieran, and every time I hear Macquarie, you think, that's not good news. So then you hear that they're offering parachute payment money as collateral for loans. You think, why? Because again, that's one of the other things you associate with Leicester is a fair amount of cash, rich owners.
They do have rich owners. I think they sowed the seeds in. Remember, there's I think it's 2 seasons in a row they finished 5th in the Premier League.
Yeah.
Just missed out on Champions League qualification. And the frustrating thing is that had the current set of rules and the Swiss model been applied, Leicester City probably would have had 2 more years in the Champions League, because potentially we could have 6 Champions League teams next season, and none of this would have happened. In my view, Leicester did an Icarus. They flew too close to the sun, in the sense that the fantastic achievement of winning the Premier League, of getting as far as the quarter-final of the Champions League the following season, they did really well in the cups as well. They started to believe their own publicity, and they offered contracts on the basis of, we're never going to finish below 8th. And it only takes 1 season for that, for that to unravel. And whether that club could be Wolves next season, it could be your club, it could be my club, whoever knows. It only takes 1 season of the club starts coughing and spluttering that things really start to look quite unpleasant. And in the case of Leicester, the first time that they were relegated, they were paying 116% of revenue as wages. That is very un-Premier League-like. And whilst they managed to reduce their wage bill, when they were promoted back to the Premier League 2 seasons ago, that was on an average wage of £47,000 a week, based on my calculations, which are imperfect, but they're not. They're not a million miles away from what we're seeing. So the club has been living beyond its means for more than 1 year, and you can only spin plates for so long, and it's now started to fall down with outstanding amounts due on to players for wages for perhaps another year or two, and outstanding amounts owed to other suppliers, in the main football creditors.
Well, they won the FA Cup as well, let's not forget, leading to the sight of Gary Lineker and his pants live on TV, which is a sight some of us have seen once too often in our private lives, Kieran. In a way, what you're describing, the circumstances of Leicester's demise, very similar to Leeds United under Peter Ridsdale, by the sound of it, isn't it?
Yes, I think there are parallels there. Humility, I think, is a really good quality to have within football. But when everybody's telling you that you're the next best thing, it's very difficult at times to not believe that, and to start to act accordingly. My main concern is that Leicester City is a viable football club. It's an attractive football club, and even if you're a Leicester fan, once the fixtures come out, you'll be going, I haven't been to Burton before. I've not been. Okay, people are making jokes about Bromley, but where is Bromley? It's that means it's ground number 78 on the 92. So as football fans, yes, it's doom and gloom now. But I promise Leicester City fans, once the fixtures are out, once you start planning your life from mid August onwards, home and away and so on, things will improve. Well,
also from the Bromley point of view, you imagine their fans. It's going to be Sheffield Wednesday and Leicester are the two games they're looking forward to most when those. Because Bromley fans will have to forgive me. I'm not sure who their big local rival is. Basically, especially if it's Orient, they look like they're going in the opposite direction. Finally, we get to questions, Kieran, and they are good ones. And the first one is from Ben Ryan, and it's sort of pertinent to some of the issues we've been discussing. As Ben Ryan says, if Manchester City lose their 115 cases and titles get taken away, would they have to repay the prize money for those titles since they didn't win them within the rules? Interesting take.
I think that's a fair comment, Ben. I don't think they'll have to repay the prize money, but it could be that the Commission calculates a fine which equates to the additional prize money that Manchester City have won from Premier League money. I don't think that they would necessarily then extrapolate that to Champions League money, but with the length of time that the Premier League Commission is taking, and again we've been critical of the EFL. Well, you, on the one side, compared to the Premier League, the EFL Commission has acted very, very quickly and has managed to get it in season. So I don't think there would be an explicit repayment of prize money, but I am pretty certain that the litigation will start from those other clubs, because if we look at precedent, we had the out-of-court settlement between West Ham United and Sheffield United over the Carlos Tevez affair. We had the out-of-court settlement between Derby and Middlesbrough when Derby were using a rather shonky version of amortisation and Middlesbrough missed out on the playoffs. We had an out-of-court settlement between Derby County and Wycombe Wanderers when Wycombe were relegated to League One, again with the accusation that Derby County had gained a financial advantage due to their accounting. So, if proven, these cases, I would imagine there will be a long list of football clubs contacting whoever the lawyers would happen to be there to represent their interest, to say, we missed out on a title, therefore our sponsors would have given us a £10 million bonus. Or in the case, say for Manchester United, they get an extra 10 or 20 million pounds from Adidas for qualifying for the Champions League as opposed to not qualifying for the Champions League. And the calculators will be out, and there'll be an awful lot of expert witnesses, putting together reports, I can assure you. And that will keep the lawyers busy on both Manchester City's side, on the defence, and more than one club on the attack side of things.
I don't think I've asked you this before, Kieran, but somebody did ask me this recently, and I know I forgot to ask it immediately because I had something on my mind. That something on my mind being I'd just been taken into hospital with a broken back, and the person who asked me was a doctor, basically. So right. I do recall saying to him, it might slip my memory for a little bit, perhaps you could write it down on something. But these 115 charges, were Man City within UEFA rules at the time as well? I mean, obviously it's the Premier League that's charged them, but is there any possibility that, say they are found guilty on some or all of them, or none, that UEFA might then say, well, hang on a second, we've got our own beef?
Well, if you recall, UEFA initially gave Manchester City a 2-year exclusion from Europe, and Manchester City appealed, and it was on appeal that it was overturned on a 2-1 verdict. It wasn't unanimous, and Manchester City ended up paying a fine effectively for non-cooperation with UEFA's investigation. I would imagine that Manchester City have got a very high chance of being unsuccessful in defending themselves about a lack of about cooperation with the Premier League, given that there does appear to be hostility between the two bodies. But as far as the other charges are concerned, those are independent of the ones for UEFA, even though they might involve UEFA things. And the Premier League handbook is different from that of UEFA. UEFA had a statute of limitations, which effectively meant that I think that if evidence was more than 5 years old, it could not be considered when making a verdict. From what I understand, that does not apply to the Premier League.
Ah, okay.
Pepsi Prebiotic Cola in original and cherry vanilla. That Pepsi taste you love, with no artificial sweeteners and 3 grams of prebiotic fiber. Pepsi Prebiotic Cola. Unbelievably Pepsi.
Now at McDonald's, a McDouble is $2.50, so you can get your gym gains on, or just get lunch for only $2.50. Get more value on the under $3 menu.
Limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher for delivery.
Mark Collins has our next question. And this is Mark Collins' question. He says, I appreciate that the existing clubs, especially the middle ranking teams, known to us as BBBC, Bournemouth, Brighton, Brentford, Crystal Palace, wouldn't allow it. But should the newly promoted teams get an extra PSR allowance in their first 1 or 2 seasons in the Premier League, a bit like reverse parachute payments?
I think this is a very valid question, Mark. Yeah. It depends upon what are your objectives. Now, the objectives of BBBC is first and foremost to avoid relegation to the Championship. So therefore, they would be against such rules. If you have just been promoted, then this is your first opportunity to pick up some global sponsors, but you're still going to be behind those clubs which have been in the Premier League. In the case of Palace, it's 13, 14 seasons now. In the case of Brighton, it'll be 10, and so on. So those clubs have been able to network, have been able to demonstrate that A, they can get there, and B, that they can stay there, and that's allowed them to enhance their revenue and therefore enhance their spending. We do have, under the new SCR rules, an opportunity for clubs to overspend if they want to pay a tax, for want of a better phrase. So while strictly you're only allowed to spend 85% of your revenue on your player costs, you can increase this to 115%, provided you pay a tariff. What I think that Mark is sort of quasi-suggesting, well, should we increase this allowable overspend to say 130% or 135% for clubs which have just been promoted? If your aim and objective is to have a more competitive Premier League towards the bottom of the division, and if you look at the clubs that have been for the last 2 seasons, I think the 3 clubs that went up went straight down. This season, not quite the same. But Burnley have gone down. Sunderland have done spectacularly well, but I think they're now showing sort of growing pains of the Premier League in their recent results, and so on. So it's if you want to try to ensure that those clubs that get promoted have a greater chance of survival, then I'm in broad agreement. But it's not for me to set the objectives, and I get asked on quite a few occasions, could you create a model to achieve more fairness? We say, well, first of all, you've got to define what fairness is. Because if you speak to Steve Parish, he won't say that fair. He doesn't want Crystal Palace to have an equal chance of relegation to that of Coventry City next season. He wants Crystal Palace to have an advantage on the grounds that they've been in the Premier League for a longer time. And I'm not saying that's right or wrong. It's exactly the same at Brighton. It's exactly the same at Bournemouth. And the old PSR rules gave those middle-ranking clubs that competitive advantage. That has been taken away to an extent under SCR. Could that be given a few rocket boosters under SCR? Yes, it can, if you go through the suggestions that I've just made. Would I vote for it if I was those middle-ranking clubs? Not on your Nelly.
I'll tell you what would be fair, Kieran, and that is Crystal Palace staying in the Premier League forever, regardless of how many points they get compared to the other 19 teams. That would be fair. I think most right-minded people would agree with me on that. I'm absolutely furious at the moment with Opta, because following Tottenham and West Ham's wins yesterday, they've changed our chances of staying up from 0% to 0.02%, which I believe is 0.02. Is that 2 in 10,000 or 2 in 1?
It's 2 in 10,000. Absolutely.
2 in 10,000, yeah. But which is 1 in 5,000. But Leicester were 5,000 to 1 when they won the Premier League, so I'm not happy with Opta. It quite ruined my evening. That did last. Genuinely ruined my evening. So I thought I'll reassure myself that there's still no chance for us going down. And 0.02%. That's shocking. Brighton and 0%. Well, you're technically safe. That's why you're 0.00%. Paul Rogers has a question for us now, Kieran, and you've kind of answered it already because you're magic. You can do that, but we're going to ask it anyway because it's one we're always asked, and it's one we're asked whether it will change under the regulator. But Paul Rogers says, what are the key elements of the EFL owners and directors tests? And how do owners like Chansiri seem to constantly skirt under the radar for such tests? So the question is about the EFL, Kieran, so perhaps we could stick to that for the moment.
Sure. As far as the EFL OADT is concerned, the criteria that have to be satisfied, and this is for somebody that owns 25% or more of an EFL club, is that they cannot have an unspent criminal conviction for fraud or dishonesty. I.e., if you've been doing 3 years for fraud and you've been released from prison on licence, until that 3 years is up, you can't become a director of an EFL club. You cannot have a previous involvement with a club that went, with two clubs that have gone into insolvency. And this sort of gets some people going, well, hold on, what about Sean Harvey? He's a director of Wrexham, and he was involved with Bradford City going into administration twice, and Leeds United going into administration as well. So that's two clubs. For reasons best known to themselves, it's going to be two clubs who had an insolvency event from, I think it was the 1st of June 2004, and Bradford City's second administration was March 2004. Okay. Right. That's good for Sean Harvey. Yeah. So if you have been a disqualified company director, you cannot be an owner or director of a EFL football club. And also, in terms of a deal, you have to be able to provide, first of all, evidence that you can afford to buy the club, and secondly, evidence that you can afford to run the club, probably for a period of at least 2 years. So do you have both current and future financial information? So those are the rules, and you could say, well, those rules are sort of a snapshot rather than a film, and you have to wait therefore for something to happen for that snapshot to change. And to be fair to the EFL, as soon as Dai Yonga at Reading, as soon as they became aware of him being charged and found for guilty of elements of breaking the law in China, they were allowed to effectively say, well, you can't be an owner of a football club anymore, and that accelerated the sale. So we go back to what I was discussing earlier in terms of Chelsea. It's not a competence test. So if you give a clown £1 billion, they're still a clown. They just happen to be a very rich clown. I'm not saying, by the way, that Dejan Chansiri is a clown.
No, not at all.
Just not at all. But he made a series of business decisions which were certainly not in the best interests of the club. So that's why he was able to acquire the club, because at the time, and I go back to this snapshot, A, he had the money, and B, he had enough money to say, I can afford to run Sheffield Wednesday for a few seasons. And he did, and Sheffield Wednesday got to the final of the Championship playoffs. So you could say, he wasn't that far away. You could say the same happened with Mel Morris at Derby County. I think what will be interesting to see is, are these rules being beefed up by the independent football regulator? And they are. First of all, it's going to be expanded to senior management, anybody who's influencing a club's decision. So that would have prevented, for example, Peter Ridsdale from being involved at Preston, because he was banned from being a director of any company in the UK for 6 years. So he therefore just ended up working as a consultant. And whilst clubs use these loopholes, they're free to do so. So I think the IFR is going to be sort of a less of a box ticking. And also the IFR will be looking for more proof of funds, i.e., are you getting your money from legitimate sources, which is something which is more difficult for the EFL. So I think the IFR's test could actually complement those of the EFL going forwards.
I think legally, Kieran, we should point out, of course, that Chansiri was not a clown. I'm not sure what the law says. Chansiri was not a clown. He was very rich, which is handy, because those size 48 shoes he had to wear don't come cheap. I think, Kieran, I think I may have spotted a loophole here, Kieran.
Oh.
But it's one that's so obvious, I can only assume I've asked you about it before. But, what with the whole drinking lots thing and breaking the back thing, it's slipped out of one ear. But so if we're talking about people with 25% of the club or more, then what's to stop 5 wrong-uns buying 20% of the club each? Does that mean they're not checked?
As Edwin Starr would say, absolutely nothing. But I think you would have to say who is making the decisions.
Yeah.
So whilst it wouldn't affect them as owners, if they were being appointed as directors, then they would come under the umbrella.
Right. Okay. Chris Forth has our penultimate question, and it's a goodie as always. Chris Forth says, "You've talked about the concept of impairment to describe players' transfer value falling over time. My question is, does reverse impairment exist, i.e. when a player is bought cheaply and increases in value? So if a player's value can be written down, surely it should be possible to write it up?"
I think this is a very fair thing to question, Chris. And the answer for this, unfortunately, it's not. And the reason for this is that accountants are incredibly conservative, incredibly risk-averse, and incredibly prudent profession. And therefore, they are quite happy to expose bad news stories. So an impairment is where the value of the player in the market, as a result of what we sometimes refer to as an impairing event. Now, that impairing event could be career-ending injury. It could be that the manager has decided that the player's not part of the first team squad and makes the player go and train with the kids, so therefore his market value would fall as a result of that. Or the club's been relegated, and therefore the perception is that the players are not worth their book value. So you can reduce the value of players, but if we take a look at Manchester City and Phil Foden, or we look at some of the players that have come through the youth ranks at other clubs. Liverpool's goalkeeper yesterday, he looked pretty tasty.
When he wasn't pretending to have a life-threatening injury, yeah.
Yes, okay. Then you cannot acknowledge that their market value is higher, and the reason for this is it's actually very difficult to determine how much should you increase the value of the player by. Should it be 30 million? Should it be 40 million? If I want to go and buy an iPhone, I can go to I can go to John Lewis and it's £899. I can go to the Apple store, it's £899. I can go to the Vodafone store, it's £899. If I want to go and buy Adam Wharton, Palace might say, well, he's worth 60 million, he's worth 80 million. What figure do they put in the book? And if they say, well, look, we've got an agent who says he's worth 80 million, you might have another agent who says he's worth 70, you might have another agent who says he's worth 85. And so because you can't get any definitive values in terms of these players, you're not allowed to increase the market value of the squad. And also, remember, if you did that, that would increase your amortisation, which would mean you're more likely to break SCR and PSR. So there's a vested interest in the clubs not actually going to do that. The only thing that you can do is that if you have impaired the value of a player, you can subsequently reverse the impairment back to where it would have been. But in all of my time of reviewing football club accounts, and let's be honest, I've been doing this far too long, I can only find one example of this, and I had to dust off some of my old files for this. The only time it has ever happened is in the case of Manchester United and Bastian Schweinsteiger. Bastian Schweinsteiger, a World Cup winner for Germany. He came to Manchester United. Mourinho had just been appointed as manager, and one of the things that Mourinho likes to do is to show everybody he's top dog. So he goes to Schweinsteiger, I think you're crap, go and train with the kids. So Manchester United reported that in their next set of quarterly accounts, and we saw that value go down. And then Manchester United had a series of injuries, and Mourinho had to go back to Bastian Schweinsteiger, World Cup winner, and say, only joking, mate. Love you, really. And when they did that, we saw those numbers being reversed in the Manchester United account, but that's the only time I've ever seen it, and that's partly due to the fact that Manchester United report financial figures on a quarterly basis as opposed to an annual basis.
Do you know what other club we've talked about this evening Liverpool's goalkeeper yesterday has a link to, Kieran?
I don't.
He's the son of the manager of Bromley.
Oh, is he?
He is,
cool.
Himself was Palace's third goalkeeper for quite some time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and also, I believe, Gareth Southgate's best man. Andy Woodman, who was a very, very handsome young man. He's a nice man now. He's a lovely man. Our last question comes from Mark Goodchild. And I'm sure Mark Goodchild gets this a lot, but I can't hear the name Mark Goodchild without thinking Stuart McConey. I'm sure Mark Goodchild is well used to saying, no, it's Mark Goodyear. It's not me. No disrespect to Mark Goodyear, who's a great DJ, but I'm never unhappy when they say Stuart says, just me today. You go, oh, great, all right. He's a fantastic broadcaster and a lovely man as well. But Mark Goodchild says, and I like this question, who owns the rights to football clubs' appearances on TV? As most clubs now show some sort of highlight reel of the game, do they have to pay the relevant league to show this, or is it part of the package negotiated by broadcasters, or do the clubs own the rights to their team's image and the leagues and broadcasters pay them?
Right. This is circles within circles, Mark, right. Because every club owns the rights to all of the matches which take place on home soil. So therefore Palace have the rights to every match which takes place at Selhurst Park. Manchester United have the rights to every match that takes place at Old Trafford. But what the clubs then do, and this is part of sort of the Premier League contract they then license those rights to either the Premier League or the EFL, and the Premier League and the EFL sell those rights as a bundle or as a series of bundles to Amazon, to Sky, to the BBC, and so on. And then they sort of quasi-license the rights back to the club to allow the club to publish information on its own website. So, you'll have your official Crystal Palace YouTube channel, your official Manchester United YouTube channel, and so on and so forth. And you will know from your own experience, working on Match of the Day, that you're limited to 3 minutes. So on YouTube, and it's very noticeable, you get 3 minutes maximum, and that's to allow the BBC to show Match of the Day that evening. So you can watch the figures on the Sky Sports YouTube channel within sort of half an hour of matches finishing on a Monday on a Saturday afternoon, but you don't really get a lot with it. And then you get, in order for the BBC to have value in terms of Match of the Day, they get sort of the next set of rights, which might be slightly longer, might be slightly less. And again, you've told me you have to show a minimum per individual match. And then I think it's 24 hours later, there's a time delay. This is when you can go and show extended highlights on your own YouTube channel or whatever channel you choose to use as a club. And you can then sort of cut and paste them, and you can integrate them with interviews with the players and interviews with the manager, which won't necessarily have been broadcast via Sky or via the BBC and so on. So it goes round and round. And I think these were sort of two of the contentious points for both Super League and Project Big Picture. What the bigger clubs wanted to do is to shake off those contracts. They didn't want the Premier League to sell the rights on their behalf, because if the Premier League's selling the rights to all 380 games, it's pooling Manchester United's home matches with Crystal Palace's home matches with Burnley's home matches and so on. And some of them are worth more than others. Manchester United's argument is that we're the biggest fish in the pond. We want to just keep our own home rights and make our money that way. But from my view, part of the attractiveness of the Premier League is that the club finishing top only get 60% more broadcast money than the club finishing bottom, and therefore jeopardy and tension and all of the things, just watching the matches come in on Saturday afternoon. It started off with Spurs and West Ham, with West Ham being 2 points ahead. Then West Ham scored, and it went 4 points, and then Spurs scored, and it went back to 2 points, and then Everton scored, and then Spurs had just gone out of the relegation zone for about 6 minutes on goal difference, and West Ham got... So all of that, which involves some of these, is due to the fact that we do have jeopardy, and we do have an element of competitive balance in the competition. If you take that away, it's fantastic if you're a private equity firm. It's probably fantastic if you're a Liverpool fan or a Manchester. You'd always rather have more money than less. I absolutely get that, but it's not good for that spring of surprise that does keep the romance in football alive.
To paraphrase Spinal Tap, Kieran, 0.02%. It's too much. It's too much fucking jeopardy. Thank you to everyone who's joined the Price of Football Club. If you'd like to join that club too and get every episode a day earlier than everyone else, ad-free listening, and invite to 45 minutes our monthly Q&A, bonus episodes and more, access to all our back catalogue as well, Kieran. You can go to our website, which is priceoffootball.com. If you have a question you'd like answered on our regular weekly question show, email us at questions@priceoffootball.com. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, you can find us on YouTube, and if you'd like to buy one of our books, go back to that very same website, priceoffootball.com. We'll be back on Thursday. I'm saying that because... No, hang on, because we've got an interview. We've got an interview coming up, haven't we? We've got an interview with the owner of Dulwich Hamlet and the owner of Maidstone United together, which should be very interesting. So that may go out, certainly for club members. I think that will go out before the news show, and then non-club members will get it on.
We're into Doctor Who territory here.
Yeah, we are. It's 3D chess again, isn't it? So whenever we're back, in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire for his customary farewell.
Well, thank you, folks, as ever, for all the support and the interactions that we have, and we always try to reply to as many as we can. There's no Charlie Big potatoes in the Price of Football. I mean, we're grateful for each and every interaction, I can assure you. Everybody at the club, sorry for the technical gremlins last week. Without getting into too many complications, I've lost my Zoom account due to, I quote, government cutbacks, and therefore I had to try to use Teams. Teams should be renamed Steams because it's a right honking pile of plop, and that's why it took us a bit of time to get through, but we did in the end. But if you don't want to fancy that, I'll be honest, it's an absolute hoot. Being bombarded with questions for 45 minutes and being able to tell a few stories that we wouldn't necessarily get past producer Guy and his very professional approach to try to keeping us out of jail with some of the things that we say. Why not just pop along and give us a review? It doesn't matter what you say. You can even say you would rather have the show presented by Foghorn Leghorn and Barnes Wallace, because between them, they might be able to sort out those bloody starlings that are plopping on my patio.
Well, I think the Barnes-Wallace approach would be a bit drastic. It would take a lot of human beings out with it as well. Foghorn Leghorn's answer to most things was standing there saying, I say. Essentially. You'll be pleased to know, though, Kieran, Ali, on learning of our team's debacle, once her eyebrows had settled down, has very kindly offered to let us use her professional Zoom account.
Right.
Actually said the very reasonable price of £10 a pop, which she said she's learnt that by osmosis from so everybody's making money out of football podcasts, so why shouldn't she? So there you are.
Absolutely.
So if the worst comes to the worst, the next the next invitation, going all Foghorn Leghorn. The next. I don't know, impressions of Spinal Tap, Foghorn Leghorn, crikey.
BAFTA.
Ali went to dinner with John Coleshaw the other day, so, which is great because you're having dinner with 78 different people,
yes.
Basically. Ish. Right, so, bye everybody.
Bye.
The price of football. The price of football.
Hey, business owners, the NFL season is a big revenue driver. Now there's a smarter way to get ready. EverPass is the only authorized commercial platform for NFL Sunday Ticket, delivering every live out-of-market regular season Sunday afternoon game. Lock in the best offer now with up to 40% off, saving up to $2,500. For the first time, you can pay over 9 months. Get up to 6 free devices and a free bar kit. Sign up by April 27th. Visit everpass.com. Limited time offer. Terms apply.
You can't reason with the sun. Trust us, we've tried. This summer, it's time to put that angry ball of fire on mute. Columbia's Omni-Shade technology is engineered to protect you from the sun's harsh rays that can burn and damage your skin. The sun is relentless, but so is our gear. Level up your summer at Columbia.com to spend more time outside and less time slathering on aloe lotion. You're welcome. Columbia, engineered for whatever.